we're doing ourselves a disservice when we keep the vision of wealth so narrowly focused to financial stability. I think if we raise our gaze and be like, oh my gosh, wealth is so many more things, then we start to feel wealthier without needing to add a dime to our bank account. And that is empowering.
Gloria Steinem once said, "We will never solve the feminization of power until we solve the masculinity of wealth." Barbara Provost and Maggie Nielsen are the team at Purse Strings that will help you navigate the ins and outs of financial independence so that you can be financially fearless. This is Women in Money, the shit we don't talk about.
Elizabeth, we are so excited to have you on the podcast today. I don't know if you know that we saw you speak at the keynote speaker at the WIFS conference. I got your book and read it, and so I was so excited to have you on the podcast today and introduce you to our audience. So before we dive into this great conversation, can you share a little bit of who you are and what you do?
Yes, of course, Maggie. I'm so touched that you all saw me at WIFS. So my name is Elizabeth Husserl. I am a wealth advisor. I'm a co-founder of a boutique firm here in the Bay Area called Peak 360 Wealth Management, but author, mom, ritualist. I mean, I feel like I live life to the fullest, but I've been exploring the intersection of money, finance, psychology, and spirituality since I was 18 years old. So this is my passion and my path.
I love it. Yeah. And there's so much goodness to share here because I love how you really work on kind of separating like wealth and having enough, and really your book of the power of enough. So kind of to start out, so many women look successful on paper, but still feel insecure. Why do you think this is happening? I mean, the numbers add up. So why aren't we feeling good? Hasn't that been our goal?
Well, so I think it's really, actually, I feel chills when you ask that question, Maggie, because I think it really comes to the core of the fact that I think we experience wealth differently than men. And I use that word intentionally, experience, because part of why I wrote the book is because in my decades of working with people, I realized that we don't talk enough about the somatic component of wealth, right? Where it's like, do I feel wealthy? Am I experiencing wealth, right? Do I feel enough? All these things, I look at my body as I even say that, right? I'm like, do I feel big in myself? And I think that's the issue is that money feels so abstract and it's so mental. And I think it's really important that we do the analysis around the money game. There are studies out there that say women have less in retirement because we don't take enough risk. All of that is valid, and the financial literacy is widely important. I think equally important is as we accumulate financial resources, are we doing the important work of understanding what it means to feel wealthy? And that's why there's a big component in the book around satiation and feeling satisfied, and the somatic and visceral component of like, oh my gosh, can I pause for a moment? Can I literally consume a moment of meaning and a moment of celebration and a moment of success that I personally identify as successful, right? Not that someone tells me, hey, you met this metrics, amazing, good job. And it's more like, no, I rocked it. I felt that moment of success. Can I just pause for a second, close my eyes, and let every cell in my body feel wealthy? And if we start to do that more, Maggie, alongside looking at our statements and looking at our investments and savings, we would start to shift our experience of wealth. It's kind of like we would go to the money gym and build these muscles where I know I'm worthy. I know I'm wealthy. I know I'm enough. And I'm like, oh my God, it just makes me excited because I'm like, the world would be so different if we lived from that place.
It really would. And it's funny that you use the word like satiated. Like I've never heard that used really outside of like a meal. You know what I mean? Of like feeling satiated. It is kind of that same feeling. And every time, I mean, I feel like a lot of women can relate to this of like you do something and you've wanted it, you've worked for it, you've envisioned it. And once you have it, you're like, okay, on to the next, and you didn't take that moment.
Yes, because there's a whole book. There's so many books written about that. The other one that I really love, The Psychology of Money, right, is he talks about that the goalpost keeps on moving. And whose fault is that? Ours, right? And I think this is a really important piece, Maggie. I think women understand relationships, right? And our relationship to money is a relationship, right? And a lot of times we scapegoat money for things that aren't going right in our lives. And I'm the first one to say, hey, we need to take responsibility for how we're creating those patterns. So literally, I mean, if you were just like, if you're listening to this, just stop for a second and be like, what's the last goalpost that I actually stopped and celebrated? Right. And so that I actually took in and celebrated with my community, whatever that looks like, because those are the moments. I mean, again, I'm not 90, but I can imagine those are the moments that I want to review when I'm older to be like, did I actually pause and smell the roses? That's what we're talking about. And it's funny that you love the word satiation because I went back and forth with my husband on it. He's like, Elizabeth, why this word? I'm like, why are you hanging your shingle on this word? I'm like, babe, because it really brings home this visceral experience of wealth that we don't talk about. We talk about gratitude, right? And gratitude is an antidote to scarcity. It's really important to be grateful. But for me, gratitude is a heart experience. Satiation is a body experience. And a lot of what I talk about in the book is how do we make wealth not just in our mental sphere because it feels too abstract. Like, let's do the analysis. Let's make sure we're looking. But how do we bring it to the heart through gratitude? And how do we bring it to the body through satiation? And to your point, Maggie, a meal is the best metaphor because like we all know what it feels like when that meal hit the spot. Like it was nourishing, it was warm, or I mean, where it's cold, it's been raining here. So for me, a warm meal today is like amazing, but it just hits the spot and like time stops and you're like, I didn't count calories. I just enjoyed it. And so that's the same concept to bring to your money life. What are those moments that you just enjoyed the success? Sometimes it means doing the hard thing, writing the hard email, firing the client, hiring the client, whatever it is. Take the moment to recognize that, just like as you're tracking a spreadsheet.
Yeah. And what came up for me is when you were saying that is like when you really stopped, enjoyed it with your community. We do that at these milestones that I don't always love, which is like a bachelorette party, a wedding, a baby shower, and a funeral. But we do so many more things in our lives than just those, where we get our community together and celebrate. And so I think we need to bring that into our financial goals, our business goals, our health goals, and really bring the community around too.
Yeah. And if I were to give you a very specific example, right? I published my book a year ago. And I remember my book coach, before the book came out, she asked me, what are your metrics of success? Which I was like, oh, I'm so glad she asked me, right? Because, I can't tell you how many people are like, oh, the box of books arrives. You do the unveiling video for Instagram, and then it's anticlimactic. And I'm like, okay, I don't want to do that, even though I did do my video because it was fun. But I was like, for me, the metrics of success is to throw a dance party where I celebrate with my loved ones who have seen me work really hard writing this book. And she's like, do it. I'm like, really? It doesn't have to be in a bookstore? She's like, no, throw the dance party. I was like, okay. And so so imagine kind of wedding style. Like I did a buyout at a local restaurant. I invited 160 people, clients, friends, book coaches, like whoever helped me along. It was going to be expensive. So I sold tickets on Eventbrite because I was like, I financed half of it. I'm like, people want to celebrate and support me. So they bought a ticket. And it was so freaking fun, Maggie, that is the highlight. When I look back at my publishing moment, that was the highlight because I felt supported, seen, and celebrated. Right. And that was kind of one of the last times that I saw my dad before he passed. And I was so grateful that I got to create that experience that he got to participate in. So that's just one example where it's out of the box, right? I don't know many authors who throw celebratory dance parties. That's what I wanted to do. And so it's more like that. What are those milestones that are so important to you? How do you take the moment to celebrate the wins and embody the wins?
I love that. And I love a dance party. And it's like, it's not like, oh, I threw a dance party in my kitchen. You know what I mean? Like, no, we're going all out.
No.
We're doing the thing.
DJ. Yeah.
And everybody else remembers that too. So it's a great experience for everyone. So you talk about this idea that money, wealth, and power are not the same. Can you kind of break down your definition for these for us?
Yeah. So money is a tool, and we've heard that a lot, right? And it's talked about on this podcast a lot. Money is a tool. It's a resource that we can use to satisfy different needs. Wealth is a state of well-being. I'm going to start with those two first, right? So wealth is much more broader. And the way that I define wealth in my book is it's a state of well-being where our human needs are being met. And this is really important. Our human needs are universal. And so I like to tell people, throw this idea of neediness out the window. We have needs. And the way we satisfy our needs is unique and personal. So that's really key, because if you're thinking through these human needs, which is financial stability, safety, physical health, freedom, purpose, understanding, participation, connection, curiosity, leisure, touch, right? And I leave a space on the wealth mandala to add to that maybe I didn't say, but get clear on what your needs are, get clear on how you satisfy them. And I like to tell people each need should be satisfied with both monetary and non-monetary ways. And that's where then money has a role. It's a tool that if you're satisfying a need, for example, a need for connection, monetary is like, I like to go have dinner with my friends once a month. I spend money. But a non-monetary strategy for connection is like, but guess what? I also like to take hikes. That doesn't cost anything. So I meet a friend for a hike and I connect that way. And so notice how then money takes I don't say smaller, but like it's a more specific role in how we create wealth. Wealth is a state of well-being that comes out in our ability to satisfy our needs.
It just makes a lot of sense. And it kind of reminds me of like everyone's working towards money until you don't have your health. And then you're like, damn, I need to go get my health back. And it's these, until you're alone. And then you're like, I need community. And so it is kind of, then those are the times when you don't have them, you kind of see how that whole picture works together.
Totally. And we live in a culture that we're so freaking focused on the financial stability slice of the pie. And don't get me wrong, if that financial slice of the pie is on fire, right, we got to address it. Like I live in California. Literally, I've had clients whose house has gotten burned down, right? Like that house can be on fire when things happen to our home, when we lose our job, if there's a death, even if we have a baby, we're like, life is changing, right? So my job as a wealth and financial advisor is to help clients keep this house in check and to be nimble when change happens. But I tell all my clients, my job is only half done with that. My job as a wealth advisor is to make sure we're having conversations simultaneously in all of these other areas. Because if we're not being mindful in how we address these other areas, we're actually not building a true wealth portfolio. And so I think I wrote the book and I feel like I have something to contribute to my field is because I think we're doing ourselves a disservice when we keep the vision of wealth so narrowly focused to financial stability. I think if we raise our gaze and be like, oh my gosh, wealth is so many more things, then we start to feel wealthier without needing to add a dime to our bank account. And that is empowering. So let's go to the empowering question. Like, what is power? Right? Power for me is vitality, is our ability to be connected to that source of life, right? To feel agency in how we design our lives, right? To feel agency in how I engage in relationships. And so if I detach and decouple power from money, I can start to experience different sources of power as I satisfy my needs, maybe in my relationships, maybe in my understanding of the world, maybe my creative contributions. I can feel powerful even as money fluctuates, because the reality is that anyone who tracks the stock market, some days it's up, some days it's down. And so I need to decouple my experience of power from money's cyclical nature, right? And I think that is just kind of relationships 101. I got to break that codependency of money defining my sense of wealth or money defining my sense of power.
Yeah, I love that. And I kind of want to go into that wealth mandala because I find a lot of advisors that we work with here at Purse Strings do have more of that holistic view. And there's a lot of advisors who say like, I do holistic planning, which is different than what we're talking about here, which is really this holistic view. And I think a lot of clients are like, well, no, I talk to them about insurance and 401ks. That's what they're there for. But this position is really changing of yes, and we talk about all these other things. And I know when you were presenting you at the story, and we don't have to go through the whole story, but like one of the takeaways was like, he should probably get back into therapy for trauma, and like they need to go on dates more. And this is how money should be spent, is on those two things, like to deepen that wealth. And so I would love to dive more into this because your role as an advisor is so much bigger now than just stocks and bonds and insurance.
Oh, 100%. And I love that you bring this up, Maggie, because I also cringe. Like, I can't tell you how many presentations I sit through and everyone's like, holistic wealth plan. And I'm like, what are they going to show me? Right. And to your point, we're like, in addition to our brokerage accounts, we do 401ks and insurance and estate planning and TPA. For me, all of that still fits within the financial stability slice of the pie. And so I'm glad that there's diversification in the financial stability slice of the pie. But for me, the holistic view is like, what? Like, is like, let's just take the time to talk about as a culture, what is wealth? Right. And I'm like, if that's what the listeners walk away with, like, like, am I drinking the Kool-Aid of what the external world defines wealth compared to what my experience of wealth is? Like, just start to question that. So, what you're making reference to is that I sit down and I use this wealth mandala tool, which is free on my website. Go to my website afterwards and download it, right? You don't even have to read the book, although the book helps to kind of understand how to use it. But it's totally free. I work with all my clients. This is our Q1 meeting, right? Before we jump into cash flow or tax planning or anything, I always say, I need to know what your wealth mandala looks like for the year. It changes every year, much like an investment statement changes every year. So think of asset diversification, right? When I'm creating an investment for a client, I'm thinking of asset classes, right? Stocks, bonds, small, large, mid cap, international. And so the same thing is the wealth mandala. It is literally a circle with the 12 needs and a space for you to add a need. If you're like, oh, I'm not feeling fully reflected, great, add yours, like be co-creative. And then what I tell people is that on a scale of 1 to 10, how fulfilled are you feeling in this need, right? And so for example, financial stability, I feel gainfully employed. I can pay my bills. I'm saving. No big issues there. Maybe it's a 9 out of 10, or like, oh my God, I just lost my job. It might be a 2. So you do that for each need. If it's in physical health, right? Oh my gosh, I'm working too much, never working out. Maybe if I'm honest, it's a 3, right? Or connection. I haven't seen my friends in forever. Or understanding what the hell is happening with politics today, right? Like you can go through all of the different needs, put the number, and literally I have people color it in, right? And so you color it all the way to the edge if it's fully satisfied. You color just a little bit if it's a 1, 2, or 3. And then I tell people, Maggie, take a step back and just look at your wealth portfolio as if it were a flower. And I always tell people, try to be non-judgmental when you look at it, right? Because a flower is never fully in bloom. Like some petals are out, some petals, but we love flowers. We think they're beautiful in their organic state. So look at your wealth mandala in its organic state and just start to see what reflections you see. You're like, I didn't think that need was so undermet. That is fascinating, right? Maybe I've been putting off physical health too long, or connection or curiosity too long. And guess what? My financial stability slice of the pie actually feels pretty full. How about I focus attention, time, and resources towards the other needs I need to meet? And when I do this with clients, especially clients who are financially stable and have a high level of assets, right? And this is really important. I try to steer away from the word net worth because I want to decouple net worth and self-worth. So high level of assets in the financial stability slice of the pie. And I do this exercise, I'm often surprised where the 2s and the 3s lies. And so the example I gave at the keynote talk was I have a client who's an executive C-suite at a pretty major tech company. We did this exercise. They do not need more salary, more RSUs, more stock. But he was, I want to say, a 4 or 5 in touch. And they were expecting their second child. And his face went white. And he's like, oh my gosh, I don't like to be touched. And that's an issue when I have newborns. And I know where that's coming from, right? It's coming from being raised with a mom who was emotionally unavailable. And I would cringe every time she'd walk into the room. And I want to be a different parent. I don't want to cringe when my girls reach out for me. And we just mic drop. We just pause for a second, recognize how vulnerable that was, and be like, okay, great. This year, we're going to channel resources towards working either with a grief group, with a therapeutic group, with a men's group, whatever you need. I'm not going to be the person who facilitates that, but I can be a guide in helping you make the connection so that resources go towards what will actually address scarcity and that will actually add an enhanced sense of wealth.
Yeah. I mean, every time I hear that, I get goosebumps. And it's so not a conversation you'd expect to have with your financial advisor. But when we're so focused on money all the time, that connection with your children, I mean, I don't have children, but I even know that's it's priceless. Oh my God, holding a newborn, there's nothing I would love to do more. And so you know how important that connection is. And it's something money can't buy, but we can buy the resources to help us get there. And so I just think that's so impactful because we've got to change the focus sometimes of more money when that's not really what's depleting us right now. It shouldn't be our focus.
No, and I think like because I can imagine lots of financial advisors listen to this podcast. I know I do. I think it's such a great one. Is like there's a lot of financial advisors who use values exercises, right? Or what I'm wanting to contribute to my field, and I'm like, oh, maybe I'll record a little video on how to use this for financial advisors. This is a much more concrete way to talk about values and talk about the impact of living or not living into the values, right? Because sometimes, I mean, I've gone through my own values exercise and it still feels abstract unless I bring it to how am I implementing strategies in my life, practices in my life. And so that's where I was hoping that the wealth mandala exercise for people who just do it for themselves or financial advisors who use it for clients to really dig deep into how are we channeling resources to things that make us feel wealthier.
Yeah, I think it's a great tool for everyone just to kind of sit down and look at and just like you said, look at it non judgmentally and see where you can even just boost things by like 1 point. What would that look like if it's hitting the gym or starting therapy or meeting a girlfriend out for a hike? I mean, it can be really low hanging fruit. We just have to make time for those things we're so good at laters, but sometimes later's too late.
Yeah, exactly. And it helps us take responsibility and be like, okay, maybe I don't have money to put towards these needs, but it's my responsibility as a human to figure out how to satisfy these needs in non-monetary ways. Okay, that might be a little bit of a honest pill to swallow, but once you do, that's where you find agency. And that is how you build power. And I would say the other thing too, Maggie, like I use this with my family. Like my family knows, my husband and my daughter, that every Valentine's, this is the exercise we do. We have Valentine's brunch. I cook them brunch and I sit them down to do this exercise and we do it once a year because I've learned so much about my team, right? Like she did it. I was tickled to be like, okay, her financial stability and safety slice of the pie are full. I feel very grateful. I don't take that for granted. But her freedom was like a 2. And I'm like, huh. I'm like, I don't feel like I'm a strict parent. What's this about? And she's like, I want to drive. I want to go explore. And I'm like, so she told me that when she was 14. I'm like, well, I can't change the law. You're not going to get your license at 14, but I can teach you how to use public transportation, right? I can teach you how to get to a friend's house without us. And now that we're literally a month away from her getting her license, we just celebrate that freedom is around the corner. But it opened up a conversation that I would never have known. And I understand how that's been impacting your experience of wealth. Fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, that's something I would have not even expected from a 14-year-old, but it makes so much sense because when you have to rely on someone to come home from work, to drive you there, all the things, it's frustrating.
Yeah.
And so I know you talk a bit about like resources and widening those resources and how they're wider than wealth. Can you kind of talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, and maybe my origin story I think is important to name is that when I graduated from my bachelor in economics, I went and lived and worked in Oaxaca, Mexico for 2 years doing a community economics program and teaching Indigenous women how to create savings and loan cooperatives, which was an amazing project. But I think what was most impactful for me was just experiencing another experience of wealth, right? And so I would go to these indigenous villages thinking, okay, I'm going to be bringing and imparting all this knowledge and my tools, et cetera. And I did, and they were super appreciative. But I was like, oh my gosh, they feel different than a textbook definition of what poverty looks like, right? And I was like, yes, maybe we got dirt floors going on. And yes, there could certainly be more financial resources that can support the community, but they felt wealthy. And I was like, oh my God, I'm 24 years old. This doesn't make sense compared to what I was taught economics and finance to be, right? And I'm Latina and I've traveled many countries in Latin America. So this wasn't new, but I don't think I had lived an experience, an extended period of time. And I just started asking people, how do you define wealth or riqueza in Spanish? And their responses were immediate. Riqueza or wealth is health, it's community, it's our connection to spirit. It is, are we celebrating with each other? Are we taking care of nature? And again and again and again. And so for 2 years, I just kept having these conversations, Maggie. I was like, huh, they define wealth and resources so differently, right? I was taught that economics was the allocation of scarce resources, right? So scarcity is embedded in the definition of economics. I remember that at 16, my first economics course. I was like, okay. And I was like, they don't define it that way, right? Your relationship to spirit, whatever that means to you, is not scarce, right? Your relationship to nature, yes, some natural resources might be scarce. And so I think what it just helped me understand, Maggie, is that there are scarce resources and there are not scarce resources or abundant resources. And we have to learn how to recognize the difference. We also have to learn to break our dependency on monetary resources and to recognize that there's other resources like time, like creativity, like friendships. There's just so many, like resiliency, generosity that we can use to create our experience of wealth. So I would say for people just to pay attention of what are, maybe even stop for a second and ask yourself, what are the resources outside of money that I have access to? And I think when you start recognizing and making lists, you're like, okay, let me be more aware of how I employ, utilize, save, give, receive, earn all these different resources. And we start to widen our language and our concepts around economics and finance.
When you think that way, you feel so much lighter. I can just like feel it in my body, feeling lighter. I can feel in that community, like there's not like the social media and all the things that I need to order these new leggings or this new brand or that stay in the latest and greatest. Like that's not the wealth. When doesn't have the value that we put on it, which is so a sigh of a relief almost. But having that spiritual value, that community value, being on nature, touching grass, like that's what's really important.
Yeah, and I would say especially to our culture that is structured differently, we have immediate gratification. That's okay. It's like the therapist that says, there's the hole. You keep falling in the hole. One day you'll walk around the hole. So whatever, we keep falling in the hole. We keep ordering on Amazon. We keep ordering on Zappos. But beauty is that there's also free returns. And so I tell people, even if you are in a pattern of ordering and maybe you can't stop that muscle because it's so ingrained, when you receive the package, pause for a second, be like, is this really going to satiate me? Is it really going to satisfy a need? Which need is it going to satisfy? And you might be like, oh my God, amazing. It's going to satisfy my need for physical health, right? I needed those weights or whatever. And if you're like, oh my gosh, I can't quite see what need it's going to satisfy, maybe I'm going to just get in the car, go to UPS and return it, right? Give yourself grace to explore without judgment because these are new muscles that we're building.
And that's always the key, right? Is without judgment. It's much easier said than done, but we say that a lot. And it's important just to talk to yourself like you talk to a friend, right? You would not say these things to her, so don't say them to yourself.
So two things. When you said that all of this conversation makes you feel lighter, like I put the subtitle finding joy in your relationship to money on purpose. I do believe we can find joy here, right? And we can make it fun and lighter. But the other thing too is that I wrote the book without any mathematical equation, right? So people are like, is it a finance book? I'm like, yes, but it's a financial inquiry book. And so, and I say that because there's a ton of little mini moments and questions where I like to tell people, like, grab 3 friends and read the book together. And on my website, there's a discussion guide because I think that the more that we talk about money and our money stories and we hold ourselves accountable to how we're satisfying our needs, A, the more fun it gets, and B, the lighter it feels. Like our powers hold story, especially when they're secretive, and money is still a taboo in our culture, and we don't talk enough about it. So the more we start to talk about it, which is why I freaking love your podcast. I mean, like, I'm like you. I love talking about money. I get to talk about money every day, right? It is so much fun. Exactly. And so, and I think that's why people listen to your podcast, Maggie, because we're so curious. And so, but to take it to the next step, instead of just listening, start talking about it, right? Take a question from today's conversation, call a friend, be like, hey, have you ever thought about wealth this way? Have conversations.
I think and they should be easier because they're not like, so what's your salary? How much did you invest this year? It's like, it's not what I'm asking you at all. It's what are your feelings? How'd you grow up? I know your mom. How'd she talk about this with you? And I think that I know you mentioned like the psychology of money before. And that's what I love about that book is like, oh, like every chapter is a different kind of perspective you might have on money, which some I'm like, oh, I could see why you would think that, but like, that's not how I grew up. And then you see another one, you're like, wow, that's me on the spot, So it's just interesting to get all those viewpoints.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think the easiest one is like just call someone up and be like, hey, what was your first money memory? Right? Like that, just it's a neutral question, and we get some great stories with your first money memory. So
There's always a good laugh in there too. And so, looking at where we're at right now with everything shifting economically, how can women define enough when the world keeps telling them it's never enough?
yes. And so it's defining enough is, I'll start by saying it's a revolutionary act, right? And I think this is really important because in my industry, and I can imagine yours, Maggie, we talk about the great wealth transfer that is going to be happening in the next 10 to 15 years. And that basically means trillions of dollars that are going to pass on to the hands of women because we're outliving our spouses, right? Because we're inheriting it, and also because we're earning it, right? And so I am so freaking excited about the great wealth transfer because I think there's going to be more and more space in our conversations in economics and finance to potentially start to push back at some of the metrics that we think are defined, that we think are rigid, and actually can be fluid and redefined. And so what I would say is that why it's for me, it's a revolutionary act is that the more we start to experience and embody wealth, right? I practice it every single day, Maggie. I wake up, the first thing I do is have my coffee and I pull my journal and I write my three things that satisfied me the day before, right? It's my everyday practice before I look at email, before I do anything. It's like I'm connected to my experience of enough because I want to practice what I preach. And the more that we start to be like, I actually know what enough looks like in strategy and in practice. I do the math and I know what enough looks like financially. And basically, from a financial independence standpoint, that is like, okay, this is the lifestyle that I'm living and inspired to. This is how much I need to support that if I want to be fully financially independent, meaning not working. Or in my case, I'm an entrepreneur. Like, I will never retire from being an entrepreneur. Maybe I'll do less and more of things. I mean, as long as I'm able bodied, I will be creatively involved in life, right? And I think that's a healthy component as well, is because a lot of times this idea of retirement is like, yes, a lot of people want to retire from a W 2, right? Working from someone else. But if you also start to be creative and find sources of income that come from your creativity, the reality is that you'll never retire from that in some capacity, as long as, knock on wood, you're able to perform what you want to do. But I think I digress. What I want to say about that is that enough is individual. So maybe spend some time thinking, what does enough feel like? And then you can take that experience to the spreadsheet to be like, okay, let me map out phase one of enough. Then phase two, we don't have to map it out until age 95. That is extremely overwhelming. So when I work with clients and I do the plan to 95, I then break it down in 5-year segments because life changes. That's the only constant is change. But if we experience and literally consume those moments enough, what I tell clients is that you're then compounding the experience of meaning in your life, right? Because we compound interest in our accounts. So make sure you've got your savings automated, but equally important, compound those moments of meaning. And then you just start to walk in the world differently.
Mm-hmm. I'm so glad we had this conversation today. I think there's so many good takeaways for our community and just a whole new way to look at things from this actual, true, holistic standpoint, not just investments and your estate plan, but really your health, your wealth, all of the different things. There is a question we like to ask all of our guests on the podcast, and I'm excited to hear your answer on this one. And that is, what does financial freedom mean to you?
Financial freedom is the ability to have agency in how I design my life, right? So I don't aspire, as I was saying before, to be retired in the conventional sense of the word. So financial freedom isn't never earning, right? Or I have clients who tell me, having enough money, I never have to think about it. I'm like, wait a second. I am in relationship with money. I need to think, talk, and be with it every day. So I don't aspire that. I aspire, and I feel like I'm already in financial freedom because as an entrepreneur, I get to design how I work, with whom I work, what I say yes to, what are my services. And so for me, that element of design and agency is what financial freedom is in connection to your relationship to money.
Of course, of course. Well, Elizabeth, I appreciate you just sharing your knowledge with the world, putting your book out there, putting this mandala out there, because I think it's so needed in this industry to bring it to the 21st century or wherever we're at right now, because money can do so much for us, but there's also so much more to the equation. So I want to make sure we have your link to your book in the show notes and to the mandala so people can get started with that. Anything else that we didn't touch on that you want to make sure is shared before we sign off today?
We didn't touch upon just literally sitting down and having a conversation with money. I describe how to do that in my book. I share my own conversation with money because I think that's the big piece. Again, as women, we like to be in a relationship, we like to talk. So sit down, talk to money. You'd be so surprised at what it wants to say. And so the book is just chock full of exercises and questions. And so, yeah, that's the revolution is let's redefine our relationship to wealth. Let's redefine our relationship to money. Let's start there.
And I know some people are going to read it and think, this girl's crazy if she wants me to sit in one chair and talk to money and want to be in the other chair and be money. But the messages come out and it works.
Totally. It's like, it so works. And I went first. You can read my super vulnerable conversation with money in the book. And there's also, I need to add this to my website. I will actually after this podcast, is that I've created a GBT on ChatGPT called Conversations with Money. So if you're like, oh, it's not flowing, but I still want to talk to money, go to my website. I'll actually add the link today. And then you can use ChatGPT. It has all of my principles, all of my book, all of the money archetypes, and sit down and have a conversation with money that way. That actually might be easier, Maggie. So thanks for the prompt.
Of course. I think that's going to be great. So yeah, thanks for sharing all these resources. Thanks for sharing your expertise. I can't wait for our community to grab your book. And until next time, be financially fearless. You've been listening to Women in Money, the shit we don't talk about. Now it's time to take what you've learned and make bold moves towards financial independence. Stay in the know by joining our newsletter for exclusive tools, resources, and updates that keep you financially fearless. Head to pursestrings.co and sign up today. Need a financial professional who gets it? Turn to PurseStrings' curated directory, your go-to resource for financial experts who know how to put you first. Love this episode? Leave us a review and help us empower even more women to own their financial power. Until next time, be financially fearless.